Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Night Vision. I am your host, Renee Barnett. Got a great show lined up for you tonight, thanks to our wonderful Amanda Curran here at KGRA, who introduced me to my guest tonight. So I'm really excited. But before we get to that, I'd like to just mention again to you that I am looking for video clips of paranormal phenomena for a television series, or actually it's 2 different television series. And so if you've got clips of ghosts, shadow people, UFOs, whatever the case might be, or Bigfoot, anything that is phenomenal and out of the ordinary, and would like to have it exposed on television and make a little money in the process, reach out to me. You can reach out to me via KGRA, or you can hit me up on Facebook, or you can go to my website, which of course I don't have the banner ready to pull up as I should, but the address is info@newrennies.org. newrennies.org. Oh, thank you, Bill. Saved my life once again. So there you go. So yeah, the clips, it's a lot of fun. I got some over this week that were just amazing from some of our friends here. And I've no doubt that some of those clips will end up on television. So that's really a lot of fun and really cool. So if you have anything you want us to have a look at, please send it over, along with maybe a little blurb about the circumstances around it, like what were you doing, where was it, that sort of thing. What did you see? Anyhow, without any further delays, I want to welcome my guest tonight. Her name is Debbie Felton, and she's an author, and she is from the University of Massachusetts, UMass. And I tell you, she's got some interesting work, and I'm so jazzed because I love it when I come across a new interesting person, and I love it when I come across someone who's got a wild angle on things. And I love history, and so this is really interesting because Debbie, you have written a couple books that are just amazing. One is about ghosts in ancient Greece and Rome, and we'll get into some of those stories in a bit. And then the second book, which is the more recent book, which I'm really excited about, which I don't know what it says about me, but because it's Monsters and Monarchs, Serial Killers in Classical Myth and History. I was just telling Debbie that just literally 5 minutes before airtime, one of my kids says, "Oh, you have a package." And I went and got it, and it was this. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I need that for the show." So anyhow, so I'm really interesting because, I'm a real closet crime buff, true murders. I mean, I've probably read every true murder ever written, and certainly know about all the serial killers. So it's going to really be interesting to correlate those or compare those to the serial killers of old. And I wasn't really aware, or I guess, maybe because, I certainly know about stories of murders and poisonings and things like that in the past, but maybe because it's so ancient, we're not applying the modern terminology to them. But
Yeah.
really, what else, what else would they be? So can you just start off, Debbie, by telling a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and what hooked you into these particular?
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say thank you, Renee, for having me, and also like a shout out to Amanda for getting me in touch with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I teach classics at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, as you said. It's in Western Massachusetts. And classics is basically the study of the ancient Mediterranean world. And it all sounds very, pedantic and all of that. But what my special area within that isn't just like, Greece or Rome. It's folklore of the ancient world. So I especially folklore of the supernatural and monstrous. So my projects have tended to be ghosts, serial killers, monsters, The Walking Dead, that sort of thing. And on the one hand, the more serious scholars sort of scoff at this, but on the other hand, my goal is to bring this stuff to a more general audience, to let people know that hey, there was pop culture in antiquity too, and not even just pop culture, but the same sort of cultural anxieties about life after death and the nature of death, and are there such things as serial killers in the ancient world, and why do they tell stories about zombies? So my goal is to basically, as I said, bring it to a broader audience rather than being an ivory tower academic sort.
Right. Well, in looking into the supernatural elements of the ancient world and the stories, was there a particular one that really just drew you in, and then it got you sort of picking up on that thread and going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was just a grad student, I had this course in, of all things, Latin composition, like learning how to write in Latin, like really useful, right? But
oh my goodness.
One of the stories we read to learn about a very nice style was the ghost story. So it's from a letter written by Pliny the Younger back in yeah. So, and he was writing to a friend saying, I heard this ghost story and it made me wonder, do I believe in ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts? This story sounded really interesting to me. And the story that he told in this letter to his friend was about a haunted house in Athens. And there was the ghost of an old man rattling chains. Like 2,000 years ago, this story was being told.
The chain rattling started way back then.
Yeah, and it sounded, if you took out the fact that it was set in ancient Athens, you couldn't tell that it was 2,000 years old. It sounded so much like just your typical generic haunted house story with a chain rattling ghost that scared off the inhabitants until someone brave enough to come and spend the night and confront the ghost. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the chain rattling ghost. You found the main illustration of the story. Awesome. And the person sitting there is the one that solved the haunting by not being scared of the ghost, by following the ghost when it started, beckoning to him, like, follow me. So the guy follows the ghost disappears on a certain spot, and the guy has the spot dug up, and they find a skeleton wrapped in chains. And when they give it a proper burial, the haunting stops. So clearly it put the spirit to rest. And again, it was so generic, but also just so familiar. I mean, familiar because it was generic.
I mean, you could certainly see how these ideas and explanations could have evolved over time, because we still have the idea of, spirits coming back to warn you, to complain about their burial circumstances, or the fact that maybe they were never buried and, maybe they're out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. So it's still, we're using the same constructs today to explain some of these encounters. But so Pliny, that was sort of the thing that kind of kicked you off.
Yeah, I started wondering if there were more stories like that.
Yeah. And I know I was reading, in doing some preparation for the show about, ghosts and spirits. back in the day, or maybe in ancient Greece, seemed to be a lot of, very ethereal, sort of vapory creatures usually, which of course sort of made me think about the oracles at Delphi, and how this mist would come up. Of course, they didn't think that was a ghost, but it was probably methane that they were breathing. And
that has been one of the theories. Yeah,
there's a lot of really interesting things that were going on back then.
Yeah. In terms of communication with, say, gods and the spirit world. I mean, if you think about it, the priestess at the Oracle of Delphi was what we would call a medium, like at a seance. I mean, the medium is short for intermediary, and the Pythia, the priestess at Delphi, was considered this intermediary between the god Apollo and mortals. And so they would pose their questions, and she would somehow commune with the god Apollo, and then her utterance would be transmitted to mortals via some sort of, translator, actually. And the oracles tended to be produced in sort of ambiguous language that could be interpreted in multiple ways, so that she would seem to be right a lot of the time. But yeah, just the idea that there was this other world that you could communicate with somehow, whether it was the gods themselves or a spirit world of restless spirits that needed to be listened to so that they could be put to rest. Like you were saying, unfinished business, not buried properly, forgot to tell their families where the gold was buried, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there wasn't just one oracle. They were, there was like a succession of these women. Generally, I guess they were all women.
At Delphi, yes, the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi was a succession of priestesses, and other places. There were a lot of oracles in the ancient world, and some of them also had priestesses, and other ones had priests. In terms of the person who would speak with the deities, but they all had various priests working at the temples, in addition to whoever was receiving the word of the deity. Yeah,
yeah, and so. In studying the sort of paranormal of the ancient world, how did that sort of lead you into the crime element?
That's it's a good question, because one of the stories that's usually presented as a ghost story also had these elements that reminded me of serial killing. So this was a story told by Pausanias, another Greek author, and it was about a sailor who was one of Odysseus's crewmen, like that Odysseus, of the Odyssey. And so this is a side story that isn't really in the Odyssey itself, but Odysseus and his men are coming back from, I think it's on their way back from Troy. And they stop in at a town in southern Italy, and one of his sailors gets drunk and attacks a local woman, basically rapes a local girl. And the townspeople are furious, and they stone the guy to death. And Odysseus apparently doesn't notice any of this, because he's never really the most alert captain. Even in the Odyssey, he tends to fall asleep, not notice that some crewmen are missing, like Elpenor, for example. Anyway, so he just sails off. And so what you're left with is apparently a very vengeful and upset ghost, even though the sailor had committed a crime. He is just furious about his own death and the fact that he was not noticed and all of that. So he starts this revenant or ghost or whatever it is, because it's very unclear whether it's an apparition with physical abilities or like a revenant that's a physical being. It's very unclear. But whatever this creature is, it starts killing random townspeople left and right. And the townspeople have to decide what they're going to do. Are they going to abandon their town? Are they going to consult the Delphic Oracle? That's what they do. And the Oracle tells them to appease the creature by offering it a maiden once a year. And it's as a bride, actually, is what is said. And it's really unclear what happens to the girl, because the girl seem terrified of this fate. So it's not like they're just somehow being ritually married off in a temple and then let go. They seem to be afraid for their lives. Anyway, so a hero comes along and sees the sacrificial maiden and falls in love with her and fights the creature and drives the creature into the sea. And, he lives happily ever after, and that's the end of the creature. Let's see. Anyway, so that's there were elements of that story in terms of that sailor and his behavior. It just seemed to follow, at least very vaguely, the pattern of what we would think of as a serial killer. So starting out with sexual crimes and then progressing to murder, disorganized murder, but then a certain type of victim more regularly after that. I mean, of course, there are a lot of stories with, maiden sacrifices and ritual on a ritual basis and all that. But this particular story had a lot of other elements that also reminded me of serial killers.
But, even with those kind of practices, I think your work calls sort of for us to look at them in a different way now, because it's like, yeah, we just think, oh, that's what they did in the olden days. But no, that still actually happens, but we just call it something else now. Mm-hmm. But really, that element or whatever it is in people has always existed. The capability for violence, capability for evil, and for murder. It's so wild. But with the paranormal, did you see socially how that impacted people back in the days? Was it used, I would imagine, by those in power? They would claim some sort of, magical ability or authority, or call on some demon or what?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question too, because I would have to, I guess, start by saying that they didn't really have a concept of the paranormal as we think of it, because in antiquity, a lot of the natural world sort of blended into what we would think of as the supernatural. They didn't have as many scientific explanations for things like weather, for example, and so things that would happen like a shower of stones, which we now might have a meteorological explanation for, they would consider an omen from the gods, for example. So paranormal, supernatural, preternatural, all sort of blended together for them. In terms of your question about people in power, would they claim to have some sort of a connection to all of that? A lot of the times, I think you can say yes, in terms of that an oracle might have said, this is who's going to be your ruler. Like, whoever does this gets to be the ruler, or X is supposed to be your ruler. Yeah. So there would be some sort of a confirmation from an oracle in some cases, even though there would sometimes be ambiguity. Whoever ended up in power could say, well, that's what the oracle really meant.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we do that today. It's like, oh, a prediction is made. It doesn't come about. So we have to sort of rework the prediction to make it still be okay. I think we see that in politics a lot these days. But anyhow, we won't get into that.
Probably just as well, yeah.
I think murder and mayhem is a lot less controversial than U.S. politics right now.
At least if it's 2,000 years old, sure.
That's right. We can't take any blame for what went on back then. But anyhow, so now the book that I was referring to, your book on Greece and Rome, when did that actually, because that's been actually out for a little while.
Yeah, the boring part of that is that it started out as my dissertation, as my PhD dissertation, and it started because of that ghost story about the haunted house, and so I just kept looking for more stories and focused on stories of haunted houses in antiquity, and so that book came out in around 1999, and it was a revised dissertation, but I was still writing it to a general audience. Like, look at all these ghost stories. It's not an anthology. It gives you some stories in explains why people might have told them and what do some of the details in them mean. But most years, even in the couple of decades since that book came out, most years in the months, the weeks leading up to Halloween, I'm still usually giving talks at public libraries or local high schools about that subject matter. So one of the nice things about studying classical antiquity is that it can't really go any more out of date than it already is.
That's true.
I mean, of course, people have new things to say about it, and there are occasionally, there are new discoveries that can help us interpret and reinterpret things. But basically, this book is still sort of comes up every year around September, October, because it was really the first book to talk about ancient haunted house stories in any detail. Because as I think I alluded to earlier, people weren't like, oh, that's serious scholarship. Nobody was going to hire me on the basis of writing about haunted house stories. They wanted me to write about Virgil's Aeneid or, Plato's philosophy or something. And it's like, ghost stories? What the heck is that?
Somebody's got to do it. It's a dirty job.
Yeah. So it took a while to convince people that folklore was a legitimate field of study for classics. Yeah,
absolutely. And did your study of folklore, did that include things like fairies and angels and things like that, or did you just go straight to the dark side?
No, I've one of my other recent books is I edited a volume on fairy tales in the ancient world, and that also just came out this past summer, and I contributed a couple of chapters to that book. So in terms of fairy tales, so not so much like angels, because the whole that's more of a Christian concept. I think that's not fair, because I mean Judeo-Christian maybe. But even the Greeks thought in terms of like helpful spirits and unhelpful spirits. Just the concept of heaven and hell was not quite the same. But anyway, yeah. So definitely, there are fairy tales like the earliest version of Beauty and the Beast comes from ancient Rome. It's the story of Cupid and Psyche.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are very, very early stories that bear resemblances to the Cinderella story, for example. They're not as fleshed out. They're not as long. They may be a paragraph long, but they definitely have elements in common, like a girl of low status loses her slipper. It ends up with the king, and he goes out trying to find who it belongs to. She happens to be a prostitute in that story. But it still works out. The king still marries her. So a little different from the Cinderella that you read about in the Grimm. Although actually the Grimm's fairy tales, not. I mean, the Disney-fied versions are the happy light ones, but the real Grimm's fairy tales are pretty gruesome. So I would say the fairy tales have their own dark side. Yeah, I mean, in the original Cinderella, like those stepsisters were cutting off bits of their feet and leaving trails of blood trying to fit into that glass slipper, right?
Yeah. Oh, we have in our chat room here, we have a historian here on Night Vision that he regularly comes on and works with me. And we just did like a 6-week-long series on medieval France, basically. And anyway, he's in the chat room. He says, most Roman emperors were venerated as gods. I spent many years digging up Vindolanda.
Yeah, Vindolanda, sure, in Britain. Yeah, North Britain.
North
England. Yeah.
The gods become ghosts. Oh, and he also said, I also helped to uncover a Mithraeum. The god Lugu was always a threat in some parts of the world. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I visited Vindolanda a long time ago when I was in England. That site is famous, among other things, for having produced so many letters home from the people who were living there. People wrote letters back to Rome. A bunch of those letters are in the British Museum, right?
Yeah. Now, where is Vindolanda?
Well, it's up by Hadrian's Wall. So it's
Oh, I get it now.
Near the border. I mean, I'm sure your guy on chat can confirm.
No, that makes perfect sense because he's from Carlisle.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And he's living in France, but he's from Carlisle, and he spent a lot of time at Hadrian's Wall. I know. But anyway, he says you're spot on. So there you go. And he doesn't like anybody. So I'm giving him a hard time because he can't talk back to me right now. But no, I was thinking, and I was actually speaking with him earlier a little bit. I said to him, I just want to make sure. I said, it's Pliny, right? Not Pliny. He goes, if you say Pliny, I will never speak to you again. I said Pliny. I just wanted to make sure I was correct.
Yeah. Plinius, right?
Oh, goodness. He's laughing. Oh, he says, Vindolanda tablets prove that Romans wore underwear. I don't know what that means.
That's awesome. I just remember one of the letters home from a woman. I think it was it her birthday, or she was wishing a friend back in Rome happy birthday, or she had received a letter wishing her happy birthday. But yeah, I mean, it was so personal. It was really fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, it is. It's really interesting and I think another thing about your work in coming up with these stories of folklore. I mean, these were things that people, everyday people, and all people. It was their beliefs. It sort of colored what they thought about things, or maybe how they conducted themselves in certain ways. And it's like a glimpse into real people instead of just sort of stone statues and, historical figures that we can't really relate to. I think it helps us. And that's one thing I always appreciate about James, too, is he always takes it back to the person that was living at the time, inside whatever big event that was, or even if it wasn't a big event, just everyday life for the everyday people. And that's why I think, that's one of the reasons why I think your work has a lot of value, because it gives us a glimpse more into people, gives us a chance to relate to them a lot better.
Yeah. I'd like to. Sorry, there is some feedback there, isn't there? I'm not sure how to adjust the speakers on my end. Is there still a lot of feedback, or?
Oh, I'm not hearing any.
Okay, I thought I just cut a bit of it, but yeah, I mean, it's tough to judge exactly what we've got, because most of the stories that I found, most of the stories that I found were from, upper class authors. I mean, like people who had political positions and were from good family, like Pliny, for example. So in terms of some of these stories being folk tales that were circulating among people that then made their way into something like Pliny's letter, where he says, I heard this. He doesn't say where he heard it from, who he heard it from, and the style in which Pliny tells the story. It's a very elaborate literary style. So, but certainly the bones of it sound like your typical ghost story. And there are versions like it in other authors, like Plautus, the playwright, or Greek author like Lucian, for example, has a haunted house story that sounds very similar, and it may just be two branches of the same, two versions of the same story that was circulating. But yeah, it's, we don't have necessarily a lot of writing from, classes other than the upper, which makes it a little hard to judge. But on the other hand, there's graffiti. There are jokes recorded. One of the main folklorists of classical literature is William Hansen, who's retired from Indiana University, but he really compiled like popular culture of the ancient world. So he's got the jokes, the jokes, the obscenities, the riddles, little smaller bits of folk life, I guess you would say, almost in an anthropological sense, as opposed to the more literary stuff that I tend to find and compare.
Yeah, I think, we get the idea that, everyone was, sitting in the Senate and wearing a robe and with a, olive wreath around their heads or something. But, there were people that were out there, and as my friend James here likes to say, John the muckraker, there were people that had more jobs like that, were out there struggling, bakers, whoever, just regular people. And those are the people that we so often don't have a glimpse at. But if we can kind of get an idea of the common beliefs at the time, we can kind of see what was shaping some of the things that they were doing and thinking.
Yeah, and actually, if I can just input here, one of the things we do have that tend to show us a little more about everyday life are curse tablets from the ancient world. So there are hundreds, maybe thousands at this point. I'm trying to remember how many have actually been discovered, and they keep finding them in groups. But curse tablets, people would they would curse each other. They would curse the opposing team at the chariot races. They would curse the merchant across the street for opening up a competing business. So we've got these little curse tablets written on lead that would be rolled up and hidden someplace, and somebody might have written it for you, but the people who were writing these things were generally your everyday people, and they give us this glimpse into people would bet on the sports teams and hope that the other one of the charioteers would break his leg or fall out and break, or the horse would break his leg or something like that, or that the lawyer would get tongue-tied when he was trying a case or some such thing. So there are bits and pieces of everyday life that show up in things other than literature, like bits of material culture.
Yeah. I bet. And so what did you find any intersection at all between the paranormal and the criminal?
The paranormal and the criminal. Well, as I say, that one story about the alleged ghost that went around killing people, that's what kind of got me started on looking at those two, the different things. Like there were the ghost stories, but then there were the stories of the killings. And I would say that for the most part, the stories about the serial killers were more, well, I want to say some of them are grounded in history, but on the other hand, a lot of the stories are myths, and they're about monsters or monstrous people who do monstrous things, and they're about heroes fighting these criminals, for example, like Heracles or like Theseus, getting rid of these less civilized people who are anathema to society. So there's less paranormal, I would say, in some of the stories about serial killings, whether they're historical figures or mythological monsters, unless, it depends on the extent to which you consider monsters paranormal as opposed to supernatural. I mean, it's the realm of spirits. Like, you don't find a lot of spirits necessarily killing, other than the occasional story like the one I described, except it's interesting that this relates back to the curse tablets. Actually, the curse tablets would be calling on spirits to enact the curse. So it'd be like, Hermes, Persephone, or spirit of whoever's grave I just buried this curse tablet in, please, wreak vengeance on my enemy, or carry out my wish so that this person be tongue-tied or lose their business, or that she fall in love with me, not him, and that kind of thing. So the spirits are called on sometimes in these instances to enact curses, but spirits killing people, there are fewer stories about that than you might expect, I think. At least that I have found so far. It's not like I have found every single thing. So there's a lot of ancient literature out there, and more keeps being discovered. So
now, in modern times, we see a lot of serial killers. Everybody knows, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, people like that. I mean, I could name off a string, of them, and everyone, people would recognize. And we see them doing some really heinous things, which seem to be, driven, by their own, baser instincts, or some horrible psychological, disruption or something. But, so we see them doing it for the sake of doing it, that's what they want to do. It's not, I'm killing you because I committed a crime and you're a witness,
Right. Yeah.
I want to kill you. That's my goal.
I get pleasure from killing you. I get sadistic pleasure from killing you. Yeah.
So is there evidence of that kind of a person, those kind of serial killers back in the day?
Yeah, I'm going to have to say yes, but I also have to issue this disclaimer that I have zero background in psychology and zero background in criminology. Anything I'm doing here is based on like pop culture serial killer psychology, like the show Criminal Minds or something like that. Not that they don't have consultants, but yeah. So there are at least a couple of cases where, let me back up before I say there are a couple of cases about X, Y, and Z. Like you said earlier, the Greeks and Romans, they did not have a phrase for serial killing. We didn't even have that phrase until
oh gosh, yeah, that's a
the 80s or something. It was relatively recent. So they didn't have any encompassing term for that. They recognized different types of murder, like intentional and unintentional, accidental, degrees of intent, crime of passion versus planned out, for example. So they were actually making the Greeks especially were making a lot of those distinctions quite early, 5th century BCE. So having said that, nevertheless, we do find these descriptions in ancient literature that sound a lot like the childhood of Jeffrey Dahmer. Liked to torture animals, liked to set fires, abused substances. In not so much Jeffrey Dahmer's case, but, started raping women and breaking and entering, robbing, beating people up. And this was before they started actually killing people. So there are at least a couple of stories that indicate this kind of background, what we would consider a sort of psychological background for somebody who then became routinely started killing people after a certain age or point in life.
Yeah, you certainly hear about people like that, sort of later on in, medieval or European history. A little bit later on, like Elizabeth Bathory and
Countess, the Blood Countess, right?
Vlad the Impaler, and cool characters like that. You did hear about them, and whether or not all those stories were true. I suspect there's been a lot of embellishment and manipulation. Probably there was some grain of truth, to the story, but we certainly hear the stories about how she used to love to torture people, and she killed all these young girls. She would bathe in their blood, which I think
would keep her young.
yeah. I think that's in dispute too about whether or not she really did.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's true, it's like those were the kinds of things that they were saying, so that people at least knew the concept of killing for pleasure,
right.
So was, did we see that kind of evil, ultra schadenfreude,
Well, it's like exactly what you're saying, which is that even if these people didn't really do these things, they were being characterized in these terms, which tells us that the Greeks and Romans recognized what we would think of as serial killing, even if, obviously we don't have forensic evidence, or at least not enough of it. Sure, like there are bodies with, some of them you can tell how they were killed, but, in battle, sword slashes on their ribs, that kind of thing. But there isn't enough evidence of any kind to definitively say, yes, this was a serial killing in the ancient world, other than what we can find in the literature for the most part, and maybe some tombstones that indicate some interest, some odd business going on. But what you just said, which is that the characterization of people who were disliked for whatever reason, if you wanted to basically slander somebody and ruin their reputation, or sensationalize or paint them as a criminal, this is what you would use. Is you would say, he killed a lot of people by this insidious method, and he mutilated their bodies, or he poisoned them all secretly until somebody found out. So, the idea that you would just characterize somebody like that for political reasons, say, which may have been the case with Countess Bathory, or, and other people in history, was going on too in 3,000 years ago. Yeah,
I just thought of an amazing sort of example of that. Just recently, my my cohort here, James Martin, and I were working on, or he was doing most of the work on genealogy, and we were looking at some of my relatives. Wow.
Sorry, the cats are knocking things over as they do.
Oh, you know what I thought that was? I thought that was one of like hissing real loud noise, because what kind of cat do you have there?
No, they just are knocking things over because I'm not paying enough attention to them, apparently. So.
Thank God it's your animals and not mine, because mine are right on the other side of the wall here, and I can hear them.
It's the black cat, of course.
Of course. Oh, I see. That probably is a sign. Let's see that cat. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
What a cutie pie.
I was on Zoom so much last year with all my classes, and he would just be here all the time. And now whenever I've got this set up, he's trying to get my attention.
I love it when I'm watching the news and, someone's sitting there giving some, horrible, news or some kind of statistic or something. And then this, cat walks by or a dog jumps up, or I love it. It just makes me, okay, we're all human. We've all got our pets, and they do kind of rule the roost. So
yeah, they definitely improve the mood.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't think I could live without animals. They're just pretty wonderful. But having said that, I did forget what I just said before that.
Yeah, that was quite the alarming noise and interruption there from the cat.
It really sounded like a loud hiss or something.
I couldn't. I still don't know what it was that got knocked over.
Oh,
this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah. This is why we cannot have nice things. Oh my goodness. But and it's interesting. Oh, I was saying that an example of that very thing was very recently in working on some of our genealogy.
Oh, right.
It's funny because oddly, and I don't know if there's anything to this, but, I'm always very skeptical, but oddly, ended up being connected to a lot of characters that I had really been drawn to in history. But even though, and, I haven't even, I don't even really talk about it or tell anyone, even though there's some pretty high standing figures in there, my very favorite is a man that was exiled from England, and they were on the hunt for him because he was a necromancer.
Oh my God!
And his name John Calhoun, or I'm not sure exactly how it was pronounced, but he's a direct grandfather of mine.
Wow.
My grandmother, whose last name was Calhoun. And it was just so funny because there are some records of, these pronouncements from the court and, officials and of what he did. And you can tell they're just bigging it up. You can tell that and they say the same things over and over again. How, horrible he was and scandalous. And he was also accused of incest, which isn't as bad as it sounds, because what he did was he ran off with his sister-in-law, with his sister. So it's not really incest,
Yeah.
But
not quite a blood relation there.
No blood. And, but he's being accused of being a necromancer. And, the pictures of him and depict him looking very mysterious and everything. He's my very favorite. Nobody knows who he is.
That's so cool.
Definitely the most interesting. But I can see how just by, and even in the reading, because one day James sat and read the whole thing out to me because he's got this, British accent and everything. He, of course, read it in the tone that, he felt it was written. And you could tell they were just like reaching, make them sound as bad as possible. So I imagine, that probably has happened throughout time.
Yeah.
Like with the Knights Templar, for instance, they were all, devil worshippers and doing all these, illegal sex acts and all kinds of things. And, like Inquisition records, they're from the point of view of the Inquisitors, but those.
Right. So it's whose point of view is it from? Yeah.
Yeah. You have to kind of know where your context is coming from. And so that you know how to, where to sort of stand to view it. Do you find that? I would imagine, because history is always written by the victors, and largely by the wealthy and important. So do you find that you sort of look at it from all ways, or that you need to do that?
Well, the case of John Calhoun, right? That's his name. What you're saying about him reminds me a lot of a speech that we actually have from antiquity. I had mentioned the Cupid and Psyche story earlier, which was written by a man named Apuleius, who was from a Roman province in North Africa. He was accused of not so much necromancy exactly, but of practicing magic, like in an illegal way. I mean, they were a little confused about what aspects would be legal and illegal. But the issue seems to have been about his inheritance, as Apuleius had married an older woman, which was, her relatives were a little upset because they wanted her estate, but if she married Apuleius, then he would get it. And so they decided that he must have, or not decided, but they decided to accuse him of having bewitched her. And so they trumped up a lot of these charges, like, well, he was buying this fish in the marketplace, and that fish is used in witchcraft, and he enchanted one of his servant boys, and the boy fell down and had a fit in the marketplace. And so the speech we have is Apuleius's defense speech. It's an apology, apologia. The word apology originally meant like speaking back, like replying to the charges against you and defending yourself. And so he said, well, yeah, I was buying that fish for dinner, and yeah, the kid has basically epilepsy or something, right? But it reminds me, of what you were just saying, which is that there was this accusation, and, the guy was being maybe characterized as a necromancer for certain reasons. And in the case of Apuleius, we know the reasons why he was, but that's again, exactly what you were referring to a while back, which is just the characterization of your enemies or people you're trying to take down, take out of power, or slur or whatever, that you would make these sorts of characterizations like, oh, this person is a witch, basically a warlock, or this person is a serial murderer, even though they, again, didn't have the phrase for serial murderer, but they would still make the accusation with the characterizations of this person kept killing people, usually for profit or for power, but in some cases just for sadistic pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It would be interesting, to have a time traveling machine and go back and just like really see what was going on and not have to get opinions, which is. It seems like, that's throughout history. You really have to sort of read between the lines on everything.
Yeah, well, it's not like we can go and interview these people the way that you could with, say, Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy. Not that they would tell you the truth anyway, right. but at least, a psychologist or criminologist could get some actual insight. And I mean, like Mindhunter, right? The book Mindhunter by John Douglas, and then the series that's had, I think, 2 seasons now. They try to give you a different view of what it's like to interview these actual serial killers. And even when they're not telling the truth, what does that tell you about them? Like, what can you tell about their psychology from the way they talk to you and the things that they say? And we can't do that with any of these older cases, obviously. So we have to filter it through some very, suspect sources. I mean, if the Emperor Nero is going to be characterized as a serial killer, the sources weren't exactly unbiased. In the case of some of these emperors like Caligula and Nero, who were described in some of the worst possible terms. So yeah, Nero's one of the ones where we've got the information about what he was like growing up, and how he had the absent mother and the absent father too, for that matter, was raised by people who had no business raising children. His mother finally came back. She didn't pay attention to him. He started acting out. Started beating people up, bar fights, that kind of thing, attacking women and men for that matter. So the background we get on Nero includes all of these things, like his mother didn't love him enough.
Yeah.
He eventually, tried to kill her and then eventually succeeded.
Okay, you got to straighten me out here. Did he really play the violin while Rome burned?
Well, first of all, there weren't any violins, so no. And as far as that goes, I would really. My colleague here at UMass, Virginia Kloss, she literally just had a book come out last year on that topic. It's called "While Rome Burned,"
Oh my
and
God.
it talks about. So really, you might want to talk to her about that, because she knows way more about that aspect of Nero than I do. But the short answer is no, he did not do that.
I can't imagine.
But yeah, Jenna really, hits the nail on the head with that one. So
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, even in cartoons, I remember as a kid seeing, little Nero. I mean, you could recognize him anywhere. He's got his little toga and his little violin.
Yeah, no, Now there were definitely fires.
Yeah.
In fact, the study of like these disastrous things like volcanic eruptions, fires that destroy cities, that's been a popular topic in my field for a few years now. And so there have definitely been a few books out about that. I mean, aside from the one I just mentioned, While Rome Burned, there have been quite a few about disaster narratives in the ancient world, including things like, the sack of Jerusalem, for example. So man-made and natural disasters. So yeah, there's definitely a lot out there on that specifically.
Wow.
And I think you probably know, I've since we had mentioned Pliny the Younger before, he's got that letter about the haunted house at Athens, but one of his other letters describes the eruption of Vesuvius that destroyed Pompeii. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, was there and was trying to help rescue people and ultimately died, on the seashore of suffocation.
Yeah. Jen did mention it earlier today that the very first cosmologist.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said, James did mention to me earlier today that Pliny was the world's first volcanologist.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. The description he gives of the eruption, looking like a pine tree. I mean, it's very specific description of the stages of the eruption, actually. So yeah, I think there's definitely people have absolutely studied that letter a lot to see what they could figure out about the kind of eruption and how it worked. And they're constantly discovering new things that, people's brains exploded inside their skulls, Lovely. Or the brains boiled, I guess,
Yeah, I guess.
And then exploded from the pressure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've got an active volcano right now going in Spain.
Right. The Canary Islands or something, right? I forget exactly where. Yeah.
In Palma, in the Canary Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, there's a live volcano cams, and so every now and then I just click back on it and it's still just going. And I'm thinking, how long do these things normally last? So how much is this going to go on? Obviously people have been evacuated from this, at least one village. I don't know if it's more than one village, but certainly one village has just been decimated. and I was wondering, how long do those things last? And it was making me think about, Vesuvius and Pompeii and
well, and it depends on the kind of volcano too. I mean, if you look at the ones in Hawaii that have, the lava and it flows slowly enough. Well, I mean, not always very slowly, but you can get out of the way of that. Yeah. Something like Pompeii, you maybe have a few earthquakes, and then suddenly, boom, you've got this toxic cloud rolling down the hill. So yeah, it really depends on the type of, because the type of volcano. From what I understand, I'm not a volcanologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a criminologist, and I'm not a volcanologist.
But it's interesting to look at volcanoes and think about we've got a lot of modern technology and ways of helping people and communicating with people in a disaster area and things like that. But gosh. Back then, it must have been awful, dealing with a such a wide scale disaster like that. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I see someone has just popped in. Let me see if I can get him to join us. I'll introduce you. It's James Martin.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing really well this evening. Debbie, what a fantastic show. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you. And I know you're not talking about me, but I'll thank you anyway.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear, but thanks, I guess.
He said it was an absolutely brilliant show.
Thank you.
And I said, I know you're not talking about me, but I'll thank you anyway. I know you're talking about my guest, Debbie. Felton. This is James Martin.
Hi, yeah.
Hi,
James, this is Debbie Felton. Yeah, well, thanks for jumping in. I sent him a message, and he kept messaging us. So I said, well, come on and join us if you like.
Except I think we have to go to break now for 3 minutes, yeah?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we will go to break, and when we come back, Debbie Felton and James Martin.
Awesome.
Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The On Air Live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Hi, welcome back to Night Vision. I am your host, Renee Barnett, talking tonight with Debbie Felton. We did have James Martin, our historian, with us. I see he's dropped out. Here he comes back. And there he is. So I'm just going to bring everybody on if I can. There we go. So now that I've got the two scholars here, you can just sit back and just relax.
Well, I just want to say, James, you look so familiar. Have we possibly been in the same Zoom conference at some point? Like maybe the Herodotus helpline or something like that.
I don't know whether we've been in the same archaeologists helpline. For those who don't like getting muddy initially, who absolutely enjoy it once the rain starts to fall. I'm not sure whether we've been in the same help group for that. But yeah, possibly.
You never know. Some of them have, 100 people in them. So
I've spent a hell of a lot of my life on Hadrian's Wall, in Vindelanda, and many other places, getting very muddy and finding not mud. But it's when you find the items, and Renee, you've seen some of them. It's absolutely wondrous. Debbie, I had a real question for you. And Renee, we were talking just before the show started about just before. I mean, Julius Caesar takes a extended summer holiday into Britain, but really, for just about 100 years, or slightly less, there isn't any real attempt to invade Britain. In fact, a lot of Romans, let's be really plain about it, a lot of French, a lot of guards, a lot of legions who are from Lusitania, Portugal, and other such places, are terrified of what they see as the end of the world. And there's this great, absolutely superb piece. It's not quite from Cicero, but of course, all great works from Cicero came from a little bit later. But there's this great description just before Claudius bites the bullet, and we know his generals did that for him. But this brilliant description, this isle is the island of the spirits. If we go into this island shrouded by cloud and of fog and of mystery, and yet of silver and great riches, as we know, not just Tiberius, but and can I just set the record straight? Just because he's my little pet project, Caligula. His name just means, if you went back in time and said, "Hey, Caligula," he would have gone, "What?" Caligula means sort of little shoes.
Yeah,
it's a bit like saying bootykins. Yeah, that's it. And little bootykins. I mean, how hated must you be to get a nickname like that? But even he stops short and gives his soldiers pebbles from the beach. So terrified he is to encounter his ancestors. I mean, have you come across that, Debbie? I mean, generally, the depiction of the island of the ghosts.
Well, I haven't come. I mean, I'm not familiar with that particular reference. The issue being that there are so many references to spirits generally in various areas. I think, is it Tacitus Germania? Maybe also there's all sorts of spooky, like the eerie cries of spirits who've died in battle in many places. So for the ghosts that I was looking at were mostly in self-contained stories. Love the mug.
I believe I'm renowned for it. So
yes, he's known for that mug, for sure.
Yeah. So those aren't the kind of references I was looking at specifically, because I was looking more for like the precursors of literary ghost stories rather than references. But I was going to say Sarah Johnston maybe, but her book was more about Greek the restless dead in Greek literature rather than Roman. So there's a ton out there, obviously, in terms of references to the dead. So we've all tried to find our little more narrow niche to actually write about. But that's fascinating. I'm going to have to. I was this in Caesar's commentaries or?
It's not, and we run the risk of Renee has done something absolutely appalling, which is put two classicists together, because we could really nerd out. It's not in the Gallic Wars.
I think
I'm holding back on Latin. I do have a little pet theory about the name of the Druids. So the Druids, for those who are listening, are an immensely powerful. If you imagine not just a religious figurehead, but perhaps a general. I think the word chieftain doesn't quite do it any justice. And the Druids are a real problem. And certainly described in Julius Caesar, who wrote about his Gallic conquest. Anyway,
He describes the
so
Wicker
tempted
Man.
to go into Latin, but I'm not going to. And what he says about them.
Don't you two get started on the Latin, because I know.
Oh, no. I was just saying that if I remember right, Caesar actually does describe the Wicker Man.
Yes, he does, and this is where I was leading to. Because
okay, sorry, didn't mean to preempt.
What you have is this idea of the Druids, the Merthin in the old language. If you want the wise man, if you want, sort of Merlins that we hear so much about in the Arthurian legend and what have you. But actually, here's the intriguing thing, and I'm going to have to use a little bit of Latin here, because, of course, let's have a look at the island names. Ynys Môn, to this date in Welsh, quite literally the island of the Monic people, today's Anglesey. Ynys Man, the Isle of Man. And of course, there's then reference to Ynys Monovia, that depicts perhaps Cornwall, perhaps parts of Ireland. And these are previous Celtic Druids who we know absolutely nothing about, really. But we do know there was at least some worship of the dead, and at least some respect, and at least some worship of, perhaps the spirit. And perhaps these Druids are called the Man or the Mon, or something like that. Perhaps they left a trail of who they were in the names of the islands that are no longer occupied by them. But so terrified, yes, the Wicker Man onto this, but so terrified were the Romans of what they could summon. Actually, we see a genesis with tales from Robin Hood and his merry men. That's a historical at the time. And of course, even in Britain today, we still have this tradition of burning the guy on firework night, bonfire night for those British. This is a deep-rooted tradition that predates the Romans. The idea of burning what's surplus, or actually, how do you create nitrates when it comes to harvest time? How do we reseed the population? And there are so many paranormal explanations, from the Wicker Man, of course, where you find this great bonfire. Of course, in Britain, well beyond the Greeks and Romans, we find James I, who says, well, we must burn Guy Fawkes. But he hasn't invented it for himself. Actually, this predates by centuries. In fact, from times beyond memory in Britain. And then you have the Wicker Man. And there you have that tradition. How do you fertilize the land? Again, this idea that the living, Debbie, we can't alienate listeners, but Saturnalia, and I'll just be quiet now.
A lot of what you're saying reminds me of the work of Ronald Hutton, who's done a lot with the history of the Druids in Britain, obviously. but yeah, I mean, because what? Sorry.
He's a good friend. I actually sort of part of my classic with him.
Yes, I've read quite a bit of his stuff, and I know he's got something coming out soon again about the history of some of the Druidic sites and the conflict between the pagans and the historic sites in terms of trying to not ruin the sites with an overflow of modern pagan rituals at them in some ways. So, yeah, it's a very interesting work that he's doing. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, James is joining us from southern France. It's called Southwest France, but it's really not west. If you look at the map, it is not west. It's just south.
Renee, it's very similar to for us in northern Cumbria, for example, or at least from Cumbria, when we find people from Manchester saying that they're northerners.
Right. Well, that's right. They do call themselves northerners.
What work are you doing there? Or are you
long story cut short, my normal day job plus a lot of research into the area. Saturnalia is really interesting for only the reason that I mentioned it. Of course, prior to Julius Caesar, there wasn't a calendar that really fit the seasons or the days of the year that we know about. So towards Christmas time for us, for December, the 10th month, for them, this is in the Roman Republican period. There was a period in which it was believed once the calendar had expired and who knew when it would begin again, this was the closest you might get to pandemonium, to absolute chaos, but also the closest you could get to your deceased ancestors. And we still have a little bit of this in the class system in Britain, of course, where at Christmas, this pandemonium means that those who know about Downton Abbey, those who were at the top of the staircase would serve the people below. But this period of Saturnalia, this thin veil that we now associate with Halloween, of course, to the Romans and to prior to them, the Greeks and the Egyptians, was this great celebration of contacting the dead.
Yeah, I mean, the Romans had several holidays where they did that, didn't they? They had the Lemuria as well.
Yeah, of course.
And they had all sorts of sort of apotropaic acts that they would do to try to ward off the dead, like putting pitch on their door frames to try to catch spirits, and they would toss beans around the house or something. I can't quite remember all of the apotropaic actions and the reasons for them, but it's sort of like when we put pumpkins out. I guess that goes back to Samhain, though. But just sort of carving scary faces on pumpkins to keep the spirits away from our doorways. that sort of apotropaic, like warding off the evil from the house. Yeah.
Interesting.
It absolutely fascinating, and again, just to say that certainly this pre-Christian. I don't really like the term pagan because what we're dealing with is a very polytheistic nature of things. But really, this idea that the dead are not something to be frightened of unless you've done something wrong, in which case you have lessons to learn. And we see a little bit of this, don't we, in Dickens, all those centuries, millennia later, and various other stories. But plenty of stories about apparitions. And of course, we can't escape the origin of vampires and all the rest of it from antiquity.
Were there stories of vampire-type creatures in antiquity? I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
That didn't emerge like in Eastern Europe, later on.
Well, and maybe I'd be interested in hearing what James has to say about this too. But they didn't have vampires in the sort of the Bram Stoker sense.
Right.
But what you did have in antiquity were these sort of female blood-sucking creatures, Lamii, for example, and Ampusai and Mormolukes, who were sort of like the boogeyman. Like these, initially, they started out as creatures that were, the stories were told about them to frighten children into behaving. But then something like the Lamia, I sort of anglicize it to Lamia, but I think the Latin's probably Lamia, right, James? I'm thinking Keats is Lamia, but anyway, but the Lamia morphed over time into this seductive creature who would feed on the blood of young men, usually in a context in which they were distracted from their philosophical studies. And the moral there was like, keep to your studies and don't let, prostitutes distract you and that kind of thing. But in the stories, they would fatten up these young men and, just feed them all sorts of wonderful meals and plump them up and then drink their blood. So that's a precursor, or I don't know if I'd call it a precursor, but it's a sort of the closest thing you have in antiquity to what you might think of as a vampire in the terms of a bloodsucker. But the Lamii were supernatural creatures; they weren't the undead.
As much as I hate the word Byzantine, really we're dealing with the continuation of the Roman Empire in the East. But you do have this Egyptian idea, which really does bleed into Greek and then into Roman culture about the incubi and the succubi.
Oh, and that's what I was just going to ask. Is that the succubus, incubus idea? These either blood suckers or energy suckers.
Well, in today's Islam, Renee, and I know that we had something translated a few weeks ago, but you still have this idea of the jinn, and you still have, for example, what we might call in the West sleep paralysis, most certainly in Egypt.
Oh, yes,
what we're dealing with is this really and very ancient belief that sleep paralysis is in fact very much to do with incubi, succubi. In other words, vampires who leech energy. And no, not the drink your blood kind of thing.
You hear that referred to, the sleep paralysis, as the old hag syndrome, and where it's a lot of times represented by an old woman, with long white hair and that sort of thing. No.
Well, I'm thinking of the Fuseli picture of the nightmare and the imp sitting on the woman's chest.
Yes, on her chest.
Yeah, but there was, it's again interesting that James has brought this up, because there's actually been a lot of work done lately on sleep paralysis in ancient literature, and there was just an article in the journal Preternature, which I happen to be editor of. There was just an article. Was it last year's fall issue? I'm trying to remember if it was fall 2019, about sleep paralysis in some of the ancient authors and the nightmare, the connection between sleep paralysis and nightmares and some of the ancient authors. So it was all quite well done, I thought, obviously, since we had it accepted to be published in the journal. But yeah, it's become one of the sort of hot topics lately, along with emotion in the ancient world and a few other recent.
That whole topic of sleep paralysis was really being bandied about back in the 90s, I think, when people were comparing it to what people were claiming as, alien abduction experiences. And, a lot of doctors were saying, it sounds like sleep paralysis and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of studying and talking and research being done back then, but I didn't realize that, everything circles back around, so we're back into looking into the sleep paralysis thing. But I think it relates much more to the sort of incubus, succubus idea rather than the alien abduction idea.
Renee, you know how excited I am when I'm with fellow classicists or anyone who studied the ancient
I
world,
know.
I get really giddy, Debbie. So I really, yeah, I do. It's embarrassing.
I've already realized you're probably gonna, I'm gonna have to put you guys in touch with each other after.
Oh yeah, we're totally going to be in touch.
Absolutely. But Debbie, I just wanted to ask you a question about the Eagle of the Ninth.
The what? Sorry.
The Eagle of the Ninth. So in York, where there's this, York, Iberacum, was a legionary centre, and the Ninth Legio Hispania, the Ninth Spanish Legion, enters into Scotland and doesn't return. The Eagle maybe does, but what you have in York is, of course, this, and by many accounts over centuries, is an account of the Legion marching off, and who knows what happened to them at the Battle of Mons Gropius. Have you ever come across that, and what's your view on this?
No, I'm not, again, I'm not familiar with a lot of the stories having to do with Britain particularly, but it reminds me of the Lost Colony from Roanoke. Croatoan. But yeah, no, I mean, mysterious disappearances all over the place. Ships coming back without crews. I mean, the Lost Colony probably just, I think the consensus these days is, okay, they mingled with the natives and went off and had a life during the 3 years that they were waiting for a rescue boat from, England. But no, I'm not actually familiar with the that story. Is that another one from, what's the source for that?
So in Iberacum, the army goes up to the, there is a great myth that the Romans never went into Scotland. Of course, we know that's nonsense. But on the way up to Aberdeen, who knows? There is the fabled Battle of what's known as Mons Gropius. And the only thing that is said to return is the Eagle Standard, although, by other accounts, the Standard disappears, as does the Legion. And in Renee, I know you've been in York, York Minster, around this area. Many accounts have told that they see not the legs of what look like Roman soldiers, but instead just the torsos. And what's interesting is that story's been repeated. And what's more interesting is, of course, the ground level. If you removed it down to Roman times, they would have been marching on the Roman road. And stories like this appear in the newspapers. Obviously, we've gone through and still are going through the COVID pandemic, but are as recent as 2019.
People are still seeing this?
Yeah, of course.
My goodness, how interesting is that?
So my question was, what's the ancient source for that story?
The story comes from, I won't say Dio Cassius.
Dio Cassius, okay, yeah.
I think I am going to be absolutely corrected on that one. But it's from around about that period. Of course, we know that the Spanish Legion was repairing Hadrian's Wall and also repairing the palisades of the Antonine Wall. Roughly in the period that they went missing. There are some anecdotes that they were perhaps in Batavia, the Netherlands, but I think we can dismiss that by the idea that later historians didn't quite understand what period they're referring to. But certainly they went missing in Scotland, and by many accounts also. Their last whereabouts were at Pons Aurelius, or today's Newcastle.
Yeah, a terrific story.
absolutely superb. And many people have written both fiction and fact, not that you can write too much by way of fact about this. What happened to the lost Ninth Legion? A legion going missing is rather a big thing, of course, in Rome. And to see ghosts walking up the Stone Gate, walking down the Roman roads, as people still refer to this day.
Well, it's interesting because the sort of the ghostly battlefields, the ghostly soldiers, that's such a popular sort of trope. I mean, I'm thinking of
Germanicus, by any chance?
Sorry?
Germanicus, of course.
Well, I was thinking of Pausanias' description of the ghosts at the Battle of Marathon, actually, because he talks about how you can even hear the horses of the Persian cavalry still. And, of course, Herodotus, who gives us the main account of that battle, doesn't mention the Persian cavalry at all, which is unusual. And, sort of have this later authors saying, and if you go to Marathon now, you can still hear the clashing of swords and the neighing of horses. I was just, you had just put me in mind of the ghostly battlefield kind of story. So you were saying about Germanicus. You're not talking about his death with the curse tablets in the wall. You're talking about...
No, I'm referring more to the accounts contemporary that they can still hear when it's suggested that Germany is reconquered, they can still hear the crying screams of their fallen brethren.
Yes, sorry. Misheard it as Germanicus, yeah.
Well, of course, Germanicus falls, doesn't he? That for me is absolutely fascinating. Really, for me, it's this idea that, ghost stories are something new to help get kids to bed early. Actually, they've been told for millennia. That's what's intriguing. And of course, we can go to the Greeks, and we can talk about a particular ancient Greek talking about alternative universes and ghosts. All I would say there is, of course, well, perhaps there's a little bit more to have a look at, rather than just dismiss it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of material. There's, it's, like I said, it's hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, I was speaking earlier with Debbie James. I don't know if you were listening at that moment about, my favorite relative that for me, and how that you read out, sort of the charges against him as we sat there at the dining table that day.
This Sir Humphrey obtained charters of the estate and resigned the same in 1646 to Sir John's eldest son, John, who was duly incestuous in the following year. Of Sir John Coggan, that one.
Oh, it's great.
But I was saying, and I think you agree with me on this, that you could tell they were really trying to big it up, because for one thing, they just kept repeating the same things over and over again, because there really wasn't probably much to charge him with in reality.
From memory, Renee, I think the ancestor had married a sister-in-law, something like that, or had eloped with someone who wasn't in the family. But of course, there is this argument of incest and all the rest of it. Now, look, in certain parts of Cumbria, that would be accepted. It was your sister.
Well, where I grew up, but
from memory, I think he eloped over to Italy, didn't he? And yeah, well, you do see some flavors of this, of course, in Rome. I mean, the imperial family, if you look at the Julio-Claudian dynasty, this is to say, it's not really a family, it's sort of an adoptive family. Julius Caesar, who adopts Octavian, who changes his name to be Augustus, first amongst equals. But if you've read Animal Farm, you know how that works. And there's this idea of the family, and incest isn't really too much of a problem, but they do have a problem with getting rid of their emperors, especially once they've been anointed.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that
Stabby time, basically. But if you kill a god, I mean, Caligula, was a bit sarcastic to the Senate once by saying, "I'm going to make my horse a senator," and they took it literally. And so did history. Damnatio memoriae. We'll damn your memory, in other words. I mean, what are the paranormal or ghostly apparitions from killing a god? And what are the consequences? What are the paranormal consequences of killing a living god? I would love to have an investigation, especially in terms of things like, I don't know, poltergeist activity. Oh, it's Caligula again. He's at it. Oh God, he just wants to build more marble. He keeps saying.
Well, the Lemnian Gardens. I mean, weren't there reports of disturbances in the Lemnian Gardens where Caligula was buried, and so I think that what they try to do move the.
Caligula's insanity, of course, comes from his visitation from the old Roman kings. This is what he says, and visitations from ancestors, and of course, when he, it's stabby time for family members.
stabby time.
That's my favorite phrase right now. Stabby time. I'm gonna remember.
In part to enable us to go out on Facebook and other such things. So that's what I'm using. But of course, stabby time. He's visited, isn't he, by his dead relatives. So you've got there a haunting, perhaps. I don't know. What are your views on that, Debbie?
Well, Nero, I think in particular, after ordering the murder of his mother, was haunted by the Furies, right, and his mother's ghost, like chasing him. So there are definitely little stories here and there about the what seems to be their consciences are bothering them, and of course Nero was all very dramatic, and so there were echoes of various Greek tragedies in all of the imagery ascribed to, having the Furies chase him because of the parallel with Orestes, of course, having killed his mother Clytemnestra. So yeah, there are little tiny ghost stories here and there about, exactly what you're saying. So yeah, absolutely. The influence of, I think a lot of them were in their dreams, right? So Nero dreamed that the ghost of his mother was chasing him with the Furies, and Caligula dreamed that the ancestral ghosts were harassing him. I'm trying to think, who else? The imperial family. I dealt with Nero more recently in terms of his characterization as a serial killer, but I do remember that there were he did have these dreams, these guilty conscious dreams of Agrippina.
I do want to hear more about him as a serial killer, but also I'm kind of anxious to hear about the woman in Gaul that was the
Locusta of Gaul. Yeah, and I'm sure James probably knows even more about her than I do, but I mean, she was infamous as a serial poisoner even in her own time, and so in terms of, can we really call her a serial killer when she was really more of an assassin for hire? It's debatable in terms of did she do a bit on her own, but the reason that I brought her up in my book is because previous not that mine is an encyclopedia, but encyclopedias of serial killers try to look back to antiquity, and the best they can do is find somebody like Locusta of Gaul, who was a serial poisoner, even if it was for hire, because so few individuals are known to, who are identifiable from antiquity, actually even remotely qualify as serial killers. So Locusta is mentioned because she was so infamous even in her own day. And Nero, both Nero and Agrippina basically hired her to get rid of Claudius and then Britannicus, I believe, and sort of it was notable. I mean, Nero seemed to have trouble getting rid of people, right? So the first attempt that Locusta made to get rid of Claudius didn't work. Like, he had an upset stomach and diarrhea or whatever. That was about it, according to Tacitus and Suetonius. And Nero also had trouble getting rid of Agrippina when he wanted to finally get rid of his own mother. He had trouble getting rid of Poppaea. So it's like Nero has this history of not quite getting it right the first time. And I don't know what that's about. And so, James, do you have any idea what that's about, with the historians characterizing Nero as just sort of this bumbler who never quite gets the assassination right the first time, no matter who's in charge of it?
I mean, we've covered on this show the potential assassination of the Abbe Gelli of the Custoza. We've covered various things. The sloppy assassination attempts against Roman emperors. Oh God, it really is sloppy, isn't it? And some, in some occasions, particularly worrying that I'm just remembering this alleged will just tickle.
Oh, I think he's frozen.
His tonsils.
Sorry, you phased out there for a minute. We were talking about the feather.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and of course that will work. And then, of course, you've got the stories with Nero that all the food tasters just end up dead. And it's just incredibly sloppy. It's sort of like this great comedy. Well, the idea that Claudius would ever end up emperor is also, in some way, tragic farce. Equally, the people who, the three emperors, are one of my favourites for Vespasian, for reasons I don't know. But one of the several emperors that followed Nero in the year of the four emperors, they're equally as tragic as well. And so what's interesting for me is that they would turn to a goal. And they would turn to someone who has a vested interest. I mean, Gaul hasn't been conquered for that long. They would turn to the old ways, for someone who could voice it. And that for me is interesting. We have to look outside of our own gods.
And you know how you were saying, possibly she doesn't really fit into the idea that we have today of a serial killer, because she was really kind of a hit woman, murderer for hire. But I think we have cases in modern times of hitmen that, went into that business because they were a serial killer.
They're sort of like, sublimating their urges in a way.
I'll make money off of this. This is what I want to do anyway.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that some of the studies I read by criminologists and psychologists make that point, that they really are serial killers. They're just like I say, sort of sublimating it into something slightly more productive in a way, and that they may murder on the side. I mean, it's do their own private bit on the side. And besides Locusta, you had these Sicarii in the ancient world, not the ones with a capital S in Judea, but just these assassins for hire, to the extent that Sulla, James, that made a law against the Sicarii and the daggermen, the assassins, and the poisoners, to try to avoid those sort of rampant stabbiness.
Of course, that extends to the Hashashins a millennia later. The idea that you have to criminalize assassination is for me, it's quite funny.
You'd think it would have gone without saying, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah, of course. We must outlaw being assassinated. And how's that working for you, Galba?
Yeah, But this was so much earlier too, right? I mean, the original Sullivan law was earlier, and it was against poisoners too, and that is the law that ended up being used against, like, to charge people with witchcraft as well. I mean, the whole poisoner part of that law was so open to interpretation. So that's actually a whole other can of worms that I'm not sure we have time for. But yeah, that was sort of an infamous law in terms of its coverage and its interpretation. And then, as James was saying, the necessity for having the law in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know one thing. After this, I'm going to start a new true crime channel on YouTube, and it's going to be called Stabby Time.
It sounds like an Itchy and Scratchy cartoon from the 70s.
Oh, no.
For those
Stabby Time with Itchy and Scratchy.
You've seen this, Renee, my Julius Caesar book.
Oh, yeah, with the
so for those who are watching, I had this 3D printed, and it's my pen holder, and it just reminds me in my day-to-day job that
it's always Stabby Time with James.
It's always Stabby Time.
It's a little disturbing.
Only slightly. But of course, again, Debbie, I must ask about Julius Caesar. Of course, again, another person that, he's from the Julii. His name's Gaius. And yet, it's alleged, and we must strip out a bit of Shakespeare with this, it's alleged that he is warned on multiple occasions of his demise. And again, this just, for me, it reiterates the salient point that in the turbulent times of the Republic merging into this empire, as we would refer it, but the supernatural and the paranormal are not seen as we see it as, well, that's the paranormal and you've got your tinfoil hats on, or on the other side, no, it's all scientific. No, this is a totally stitched together system. There is a belief that the paranormal is as good as, not that science existed, nor did in the Roman period the terms for. Can I just shout at you two? Autumn we're in. You call it fall, but anyway, if we went back into the Roman period, there was no word for it.
It was no what? Sorry.
There was no word for autumn.
Oh, right. Okay.
Equally, there was no term for teenager or homosexual or anything like that. Very different values, but equally, this idea that the paranormal was something separate. But when it came to Caesar, the warning of the attempt on his life, whether or not this came from otherworldly advice, is of course, and should of course, been treated as sacrosanct. And of course, Caesar perhaps believes he's above that.
Well, yeah, a little hubris there, but you reminding me. Wasn't there? I mean, to go a little farther, a little earlier in Caesar's history, actually, wasn't it sort of before he was about to cross the Rubicon? There was this sort of apparition that appeared to him. I mean, you have to remember that I'm not actually a historian. I do the folklore, so this is why I'm not always bringing to mind maybe the same stories that you're thinking of, but that seemed to be a sort of he took that seriously in comparison with the
well, of course he does, and
because it's in his favor, right? It's in his favor. So.
Throughout his invasions, he has a few problems with rivers because, of course, that's where the nymphs are, and Caesar's incredibly vain, and he's worried that he will lose all of his hair, not just some of it. I mean, he's retreating more than the Gauls were in 55 BC, let's face it. And of course, he's worried that the nymphs will not give him that virality. Of course, and he's lost his daughter, of course, who is married to Pompey. So there is this great I mean, it's nothing separate in Roman life, is it? Or Greek life, for that matter. This idea of folklore and what we would call folklore, this is part and parcel of everyday life.
Yeah. Well, and in terms of what you're saying about rivers, I mean, it was always, to a larger extent, crossing rivers, like especially really large ones, was always seen as a sort of hubristic act in the sense that this is a boundary you're not supposed to cross. Like Herodotus, if I remember right, makes a kind of a big deal about that. You cross that river and look, Persia conquers you, that kind of thing. And so aside from the fear of the nymphs, there was this sort of, this is a boundary. You cannot come back from this when you cross this. I mean, we still, use the expression for that reason.
And of course, the other part of folklore, I mean, at least today, is, of course, if you command a river, you command the territory in which it either flows into or flows out of. So this idea that you are crossing into the territory, unsacred, this idea of the sacred land around Rome, of course, was such an extreme act. And of course, you then have the much later on in the 70s AD, the explosion of Vesuvius. And there's various ideas. Pliny, and you go.
I said Pliny.
Okay. Well,
We love Pliny.
Everyone loves Pliny. That's another idea for a TV show. Everyone loves Pliny. But of course, the first volcanologist who, I know, I'll go over to the volcano and see if I can rescue my own boat and materials and all this. But of course, this idea that we interact with the gods as well. The god Vulcan, there is an interaction. He will spare me somehow because I have been kind to him. Well, that worked out well for Pliny the Elder. And if you don't get British sarcasm, I was being sarcastic. It didn't work out well for him at all.
Yeah.
But, again, just this reiteration that what we would call folklore and the paranormal and all of this is all part and parcel of day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, I must ask as well about the green men and women across Europe. Of course,
sorry, the green man.
The green men and the green women who are found in churches across Europe, potentially being.
Sorry, do you mean the? I'm thinking of the faces. Especially like in Roman bath and all that. The sort of the amalgamation of. What was it? Sulis Minerva was an example of an assimilation between the Celtic and the Roman, and the Green Man I thought was a little maybe less so in terms of assimilation. It was more Celtic than Roman, but they sort of picked up on it.
You've got two cultures. You've got the Persian with Arcadia, and of course you've got the Celtic that sort of meet in the middle, France and all of this. And this veneration of nature that ultimately leads to the Arthurian legends. Arthur is meant to emerge from this period of uncertainty when the Roman Empire in the West collapses relatively rapidly. But this idea of the Arthurian legend, of course, and the folklore that's with the lady in the lake, the sword in the stone. Well, I've got news for you. Where else are you going to get iron from?
Okay. So actually, James, I wonder what you think of this, because in terms of the iron, this idea that iron can repel spirits seems to go back, again to the very early, even in Greek history, like the metal workers, the Telkines, for example. There are these stories of spirits being bound with iron, like you make a statue of the troublesome spirit and you bind it in iron, or you put iron bars over a grave to keep the spirit in there. And so I'm wondering, again, what is the relation between something like that and what you just mentioned about the iron? But also, what is it about iron that would keep spirits away? Is it iron is a product of slightly more modern technology, and spirits are more like this elder world kind of idea, like technology, knowledge can keep spirits at bay? I mean, what exactly is going on there with the iron? I guess this is my very general, vague question for you.
My view, I'll try not to give a fundamental breakdown into the atomic structure of iron, but my view is it's magnetic no matter how you smelt it. And furthermore, the land gods can never interact with oceanic gods. Oceanic gods they bathe in salt, in essence. So you've got this barrier. Rivers are, of course, this middling point where it's danger from all sides.
Yeah, fresh ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, you've got certainly modern folklore and a few friends who practice more pagan views would say that in order to keep bad spirits out, then of course you need iron and salt.
But what is the connection in terms of the properties of iron and salt versus the spirit?
Iron is naturally magnetic.
It repels, or what's the significance of the magnetism?
Well, in being magnetic, it's dipolar in terms of the way that it's forged. It can be beyond dipolar. It can have multiple poles, but normally there is a level of bipolar activity within, for example, a sword or something like that.
So is the idea
it's a fundamental part of who we are also.
Okay.
Is the idea, though, that the metal, if it's magnetic, then it can draw to or it can repel. So is the idea that they're using it in such a way that it repels the evil spirits?
If you imagine you've gone back in time to Debbie, I think it was mentioned earlier about John the Muck Shoveler. If we went back to John or Jane the Muck Shoveler in Ephesus, then part of perhaps what we call Greece, and you found something magnetic, that is to say, without touching each other, they would be attracted or repelled.
Yeah.
But can you, unless you understood magnetic properties, which really don't exist before the 1600s, allegedly, this might be seen as either some sort of magic or some sort of divine metal.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering. Is like, what were the properties they would have seen in it that would have caused them to think that it could have this effect? Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And of course, they understand this with copper. And we today know that copper has various medicinal properties. For example, if you drink out of copper cups, it has a disinfecting quality to it. Some people realized, I'm just trying to recall who it was. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Galen because he was crazy by modern medical standards, but he also appreciates the benefits of drinking from copper. It seems that people who drink from copper, he understands, don't get as sick as people who don't, who drink from ceramics. And we know this today. We know that copper does have genuine disinfecting qualities. It has various qualities. But of course, this isn't explained by science or today's technology. This is explained that, well, of course, we've had to get a sword from the stone. So we must thank earthen gods. And just for this, of course, I enjoy Vinland, and I would recommend to anyone, if they can get to Northern England, please visit.
Oh, Vinland is just amazing, really.
Isn't it? It's superb. I've enjoyed digging up a few things there. But of course, it's not Jupiter, Jupiter's Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the best and greatest, the king of the gods that they worship there. No, it's Jupiter. But we rather like our local weather god. And of course, the Romans would say, it's a bit cold here. Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, and various local weather gods, you're much better if you could just let us be warm. It's January, we're really cold.
The weather up there is, it's very cold even when it's supposed to be warm, right?
Yeah. Very cold.
I just think it's warm all the way around. But you find near practically every river Nymphaeum and also Mithraeum. And of course, near Vinland, you have a very rare example of a Turanian, not a subterranean, Mithraeum.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm so used to seeing the Mithraeum underground.
Broccolicia, I know I helped uncover its eastern wing. Broccolicia, the land of the badgers, basically, for you and me, is Turanian. And some of the beliefs there were, well, it has to be, because if we go underground, if we go further underground, the belief was the various Celtic gods that we've buried would emerge again. Well, at least that's one explanation.
We're right at the end of the show, guys, and I want to thank you, Debbie, for joining us. I want to thank Amanda Curran again for making it possible, and I really want to thank James for jumping in.
It was so nice to meet you virtually, finally, James.
Yeah, and you guys.
And you too as well.
I want to remind everyone about the book, Monsters and Monarchs by Debbie Felton. Also, you can look at her older book on haunted Greece and Rome. But definitely check them out. I would definitely recommend them. And I know James would. Oh, that's another one.
I have two.
Oh, did you see her other cat, James? He looks like Tim.
Oh. Is that a Paddington bear?
Oh, that's a real kitty. He's got that old stuffed one. But he's got 3 cats and a dog. I just have 3 dogs. Anyway, Debbie Felton, thank you so much for joining us, James.
Oh, thank you for having me, Renee. And again, wonderful to meet you both. And thank you, Bill, also.
You guys keep in touch. And if you can't figure out how to do it, both of you can reach out to me.
I'm sure I can find you.
He's out there. All right, in more ways than one. So thank you so much. Join us next week for another edition of Night Vision.
Thanks again.
Be nice to each other.